sound? Does everybody hear me okay? Is this all right? Okay, I think we might have a few other stragglers coming in, but I'm going to get started. I want to thank you for coming into potentially the hottest room in the building for the most depressing topic. So, good job. I can't believe we have this many people here. Yeah, right. Yeah, and just before lunch. So hopefully we can get through this. You guys can get out of here, cool down, grab something to eat. Thanks for joining me. My name is Reed Robinson. I was one of 4 co-founders for the company Heroic. This is our former homepage. Has anybody here in the audience ever been to Heroic, beheroic.com? Well, thank you for keeping us afloat as long as you did. I made a joke about this being a depressing topic, and I really want to reinforce that this actually isn't a bad story. You know, when we're starting companies, you never want to think about what happens when you fail, right? That's the worst case scenario. And I'm here to tell you that's actually not that bad, you know? It happens, and I would actually argue that you learn a lot more by failing than when you totally hit a home run on your first try. So what I want to do here today, and really my whole intention of being here is for a few different reasons. Number one, I don't think enough people are talking about this, and I'm happy to share our experience with you. For the second reason, so that you guys can learn to avoid the same mistakes that we did. How's it going? The last thing is I really want to reinforce it sucks when things don't work out, but the lesson here is I would do this again in a heartbeat. So if you haven't experienced failure, you probably will at some point. I'm telling you, it's not that bad, and you're going to end up being stronger as a result. So what I've got on the next few slides is just a few different lessons that I've personally learned. You know, I said this is one of 4. This is really my personal experience in this. Some apply to what we did as a business. Some apply to how I handled myself as a co-founder. And as we're going through this, I would definitely encourage you, ask questions, raise your hands. We'll try to make this as engaging as possible. So, like I said before, this is our homepage. Thank you for checking it out if you did. To give you a background on Heroic, Heroic was an alternative to Angie's List where we were free for users. You share recommendations between your friends and neighbors rather than from total strangers. So, great concept. It didn't work out. And it didn't work out for a number of reasons, which we'll kind of talk through. But, you know, the biggest thing, what happens when you end up deciding to quit is, in many cases, you run out of cash. So we raised, I think, it ended up being about 170 grand. And there were 4 of us working on it, taking a modest salary throughout the course of maybe a year of the 2 years that we were operating. So we spent about 2 years on the project. In that time, we came out with 3 different versions of the site, which were all based around a different kind of user experience and interaction, all around trying to help homeowners find plumbers, painters, and other different home service providers. And throughout those kind of 3 versions that we launched, we never really hit the business model. And that's really, of the reasons that it didn't work out, probably one of the biggest drivers for it. We just never figured out how to monetize our community. The user adoption was pretty solid. I think by the end we had about maybe 1,500 people we considered active users, with another probably about the same number of recommendations on the site. So it was working, and it was really cool to see people using it the way that we had envisioned it to be used. But again, when you're not focusing on raising or using your model to produce cash, you're screwed. So don't do that. So this is my first of the lessons learned. it's all about validating assumptions, right? So you guys have probably read things like the lean startup. You hear about iterations. That's all talking about assumptions, right? Because when you start a company, what are you thinking about? Probably the biggest assumptions that I'll actually cover in the next couple lessons is you've got a product that people care about. That's actually an assumption. You've got a team that actually can deliver on your vision. That's an assumption. And people want to pay you to do what you're doing, and that's also an assumption. You have a question?
Yeah, no, I think one of the big assumptions is that everybody else has got the same problem I have. And
Yeah.
the solution that I want is the solution that everybody else wants.
Totally, right? So yeah, you come at a problem, and you think this is the Cadillac solution. How I would solve my problem is how everybody else. So I'm going to draw just a kind of quick cycle about how to validate assumptions. But you got prototype into feedback, development. Now, keep in mind that I'm talking from my experience in the digital route. I think the same thing applies if you're actually selling a product. It's the same cycle. So they feed each other. And what I mean by this is the iterative cycle that you hear about in lean startups, and this is all about validating assumptions. So in the early stage, your prototype is your idea, and then you share it with people and you get feedback from it, and then you make adjustments based on your feedback to develop the next prototype, which in a digital sense, maybe that now goes to your alpha, beta website, et cetera, et cetera. You're going around the circle, round and round getting feedback. And does anybody know the most important form of feedback?
Money.
You got it. Money. Everybody, especially in Minnesota, is going to tell you that you've got a great idea. And then you ask them to pay for it, and you realize you don't have the greatest idea. So I would encourage talking to people. Getting any sort of feedback is great. If you want really good feedback, ask people to pay you. And that's going to probably lead well into this next one. Sell it, then build it, not the other way around. You can see we've got a cart before a horse in this image, and that's exactly what you're doing. And this is the mistake that we made. When I talk about our 2-year kind of process of being involved in this, we spent so much time developing our community, our website, our portal, working so much on the user experience and like what are people going to want. And every time we launched our next version of the site, we decided not to ask people to pay for it. We're like, oh, let's just put it out there and kind of see how it happens, and then if it really catches on, we'll turn on the financial model. And we never did. And that's a big reason why it didn't work. Again, I'm talking from a digital perspective, but I also think in a physical product model, you can do this as well. From a digital sense, the way that I would do it differently now, if I have an idea, I'm a entrepreneur. I've got a great idea for a website. I'm not going to come up with the idea. I'm not going to create a logo and then build something and then eventually try to sell it. That's what we did with Heroic. The next time around, I'm going to sell my idea to somebody and then build it, have them pay me to build it, and then find other people who are willing to pay me to build it for them as well. So from a digital perspective, the way that I see that working is probably in a consulting arrangement. So maybe you're a consultant working on a project. You can arrange it with whoever you're working with that, hey, I think we've discovered something. Do you mind if I continue to develop this while I'm solving this problem for you, knowing that I'm eventually planning to take this and scale it? And whoever you're working with from a consulting model hopefully is comfortable with you doing that. If they're not, find somebody who is. From a physical business with a product, the way that the way that places like Kickstarter have changed our ability as entrepreneurs to develop products and have people pay us for those products before they even exist is just mind-blowing. Like, it's totally changed the game for us. So don't invest too much of your own time and your own money building something, because you don't know what other people want till they're paying you for it. So have them pay you for it immediately. Yeah.
So should you at least have like some kind of prototype before you try to sell it, or is there kind of balance between, doing some initial development?
Yeah, it's a good question. So at what point do you build something to share with somebody? You have to have a really good idea and a good way to talk about an idea, but you can fake that, and there's so much to, for maybe an investment of $5,000, getting an industrial designer or a user experience or a graphic designer to build what you envision your product to become looking like could be enough to convince other people to pay you to develop it. Does that make sense? So you might make a small investment. It's either in your own time or in your own cash in making the vision clearer, but don't build the product without having somebody pay you for it. Good question. This is another one of the assumptions that I talked about earlier, that you've got the team that's has what it takes to succeed. You don't know until you're in the midst of it, and again, back to our Minnesota roots, I think at least in our experience, we were a little too nice and conflict averse to really address the holes that we had on our team. But it's so important. We had 4 people. That's a lot. That's a lot more than what some startups have as a group of founders. But even with 4 people, there were things that we were really bad at. We were strong on the development. We were strong in marketing. We were really, really weak in finance and sales. So there are some core aspects of operating and owning a company that are key. And if you don't have somebody on your team that can serve those functions, you have to acknowledge it immediately and get it filled immediately. And that includes things like HR, accounting, legal, all those other things that you don't think you should probably invest in right away. You absolutely need to do that. And you probably don't necessarily need to have that on your team, but it is worth the investment to pay to have somebody to help you get set up. It's only going to help you in the long term. We didn't have that, and it really hurt us, which there's another lesson I'll talk about in relationship to that. But just know your team, be honest with each other, and focus on the things that you're best at. I mean, that's what's going to make it successful. Yeah. Yeah.
But I guess it's like, do you have like a mentor, or like how do you sort of define for yourself what's important?
I'm going to answer that in a roundabout way. This is a sub-lesson on this point. What we did is, when we were formulating our team, we said, okay, I'll be the CEO, you be the chief marketer, you be the CTO and the CPO. And we just jumped into those roles way before we should have. It was good that we gelled as a team and that we knew that we could do that, but immediately recognizing ourselves as capabilities in this one space, we kind of set up boundaries to not really discover what our true strengths were as a team. So that kind of answers your question. I mean, the other answer to your question is surround yourself with smart people. I mean, that's just good business practice. If it's a mentoring, if you're paying for a consultant who has experience in doing what you're doing, those investments in time and money are absolutely worth it. Yeah.
Does the team come during the financing
That's, yeah. The, you're not, your likelihood of raising cash with a weak team is very low. So while you're having those conversations, your investors are going to ask you who's managing your books, who's selling your product. And if you don't have that question, at least from we've got a guy or we've got a gal who's going to be great at this role that we're talking to with your investment, we can bring them on. They'll be able to see through your team immediately. So know how to answer that question. Yeah.
What are some fundamental, like, core members of that team then that would be essential to at least start?
Okay, sure. So who do you need on the team from the beginning? People who can build, whether that's developers or industrial designers, engineers. You have to have solid builders, and sales. Those two, I would say. And then everything else, I mean, obviously leadership will develop, marketing, HR, legal, accounting, finance. It's hard for me to say that those things aren't as important, because all those functions they basically build the skeletal system or the foundation for how your business operates. So if you don't have people who can build and sell your product, it's not going to work. But once you have those two things recognized, then build the foundation that's going to end up, allowing those resources to succeed. Yeah.
Just speaking from experience, I worked at a failed startup.
Nice.
And I definitely learned a lot. And one thing applicable to this is that the leadership that I had, they were all friends.
Yeah.
And so as me coming out of the party, when something would happen, they were immediately on the defensive.
Yeah.
They were ready to back each other up.
Yeah.
When something was glaringly wrong. For instance, we did online marketing.
Yeah.
They hired a 55, 60-year-old lady.
Yeah.
And she had someone do her PowerPoints for her.
Ah.
So how would you have someone lead, initiatives?
Yeah. Yeah. Working with your friends, that's a whole nother, we'll save that for an afternoon session, because we did the same thing. The next lesson is see things to fruition. This is kind of something that you have to balance with that whole cycle that we talked about earlier. You want to be able to fail fast and learn from what you're doing, but you also have to understand that some of your strategic moves and the things that you're building actually need time to develop to figure out if they actually work. It's such a hard balance, I can't tell you what that amount of time is or how to recognize it, but just the example that I can share with you is, we've got our beta launch, we're getting people on the site, we're trying to figure out how to maintain engagement, and we launched this idea of, you share 3 recommendations from your profile of great providers that you like. We'll give you a free hour of cleaning. This is one of the strategies that we did. So you come to the site, you've got a great splash page that's informing you all about the program. It makes it super easy to make a recommendation. I mean, it's literally could take you 5 minutes to get an hour of free house cleaning. So it was a great deal. We spent a week developing it, a week finding the right provider to fulfill, a week testing, and then pushed it. And then it was pushed for about a week before we kind of changed directions, right? And in that specific experience, I mean, my partners might disagree with me, but I don't think we spent enough time really trying to figure out if that was going to be a good engagement strategy for our website. You really need to let things develop, and that takes time. Any questions on that one? Okay, this is more of like a strategic one, and if I were to do it again, I would really, really recommend that you do things that people don't like doing. So my question for this slide is like, what do people really get excited about in startups? You got like mobile, social platforms, all these like other way overhyped, ridiculous things that are have very low barriers to entry that are becoming easier and easier to get into. So we've got a great conference here. I don't know how many people, let's call it 500 people showed up for this event. This event takes place in the Bay Area every weekend with about 10 times as many people. And you know what they want to do? They want to create the same things that we're trying to create here. Like, think about your competition. There's so much energy and attention going towards things that are sexy to talk about. And all the while, there's nobody paying attention to things like sanitation. And, my dad owns a garage door repair company. Like, oh, God, those types of companies are ridiculously rich with cash and run by people who don't think about how to use technology and marketing to make them better. So think about this, because I would definitely recommend that you get into the trash collection business before you start a service for exchanging recommendations between your friends on Facebook. You'll make a lot more money. Is anybody doing something interesting that they want to plug in this thread? Yeah?
We developed a safety app. It's kind of like a Lyft campus escort service.
Okay.
So you just say, here I am, and then campus escort comes and picks you up.
Cool. Security. You're addressing security. That's a good one. The next one, I mentioned holes in our team earlier, and our cash management was one of the biggest problems. And in a startup, you have to be able to know how all of your decisions are affecting your bottom line. So intimately know your cash situation. I think this is actually, if I were to be in a startup again, I would actually have something like this on a wall, where everybody knows it, so that they can look at it and say, okay, I just came up with this strategy I want to share. What is this strategy going to do to that number? Is that going to increase it, or is it going to decrease it? And how much time? Because if you don't know the situation and you're separated from understanding your budgets and how to keep yourself alive, you're going to make decisions that are going to hurt your business. It's just like somebody who has a credit card that doesn't look at their bank statements. Like, you're going to make some really bad decisions. So I don't know if there's anything else to add on that, but there is probably a conversation around what is the appropriate number of people to have access to that number. I don't know the specific answer to that, but I would say if I had fewer than 10 employees, that number would be on our wall, and they would all know it. Maybe even more than that, maybe 50. Because you just make better decisions if you know what you're doing. This one's more of a personal one for me. Have confidence. My experience as one of 4 co-founders, and you shared the same example, I felt the exact same way, where I started working with some friends, and we tried to be nice and respect each other's boundaries and responsibilities, and our personality dynamics were fine. I mean, I don't think they were any different than what you'd find in your own startup. But one thing I found myself doing throughout the course of the 2 years was, at first, like, my personality is fairly critical, right? So I analyze things quickly, and if there's a question in my mind that I see as a potential risk, I'm going to raise it. And from our group, that became the kind of devil's advocate. And it's important that you have that dynamic on a team, but from my personal perspective, I felt like I was always the guy saying no. And then eventually, I just got tired of doing that. And the thing that I really want to reinforce about having confidence here, I think confidence is different for everyone, what they want to be confident in. But for me, in my experience, like startups are not for timid people. You know, you're making such important decisions that affect your livelihood. And I got into the situation where I was allowing decisions to be made without letting my gut respond, and kind of quieted that voice of dissent. There's a way to do that that's a lot more easier to take from those who are hearing whatever I have to disagree with. But instead of learning how to do that well and to share that feedback well, I quieted it and I lost confidence in my ability to share that. So that's my bit of having confidence, but your bit might be something totally different. But whatever it might be, the reality is the same. Like you have to speak up. You have to know that you're doing this for a reason, and you're going to make it work. And don't be afraid to know that you can do it. The last one is to not take yourself too seriously. I can't believe I found that picture. That was perfect. Like, you picked to be in a startup, right? Nobody had forced you to do it. The risk that you run in entering a startup is that you bring in the baggage of the things you didn't like about your last job and repeat them. There's so much that you gain by being in your own situation that you can define the rules. So if there's something that you don't like, change it. Like throughout the course of it, throughout the course of my experience, I was amazed at how much I felt like I think this should be more fun than it is. Like, why isn't this more fun? This is what I wanted to do. But there's so much pressure, and I allowed that to kind of like to victimize how I felt about the experience. When reality is, I had all of the power in the world to say, you know what, today we're not going to do anything related. We're just going to go on a bike ride around the lakes, whatever. We're just going to go get beers. We can do whatever the hell we want. We're running this thing. And like the other side of this, don't take yourself too seriously, is you do have to have confidence and you do have to be able to say what you think, but you probably don't know what you're doing. You're full of shit most of the time. And so acknowledge that. And you know, like there's a humility that's involved in all of this. You're learning it for the first time probably, just like everybody else on your team is. So, and that's okay, make mistakes.
When did it for you go from fun to hating it or not enjoying it?
It's pretty quick. Pretty quick. Probably 3 months after going.
And why?
I didn't hate it. I shouldn't say I hated it. You know, I was just like, why isn't this more fun? You know, I thought it would be more fun. Yeah, I didn't hate it.
What would you have done to make it more fun if you go back? Make money?
Yeah, right. That would have made it a lot more fun. You know, one thing that you know, back to weaknesses on the team was our approach to HR. We didn't like pause to celebrate things. You know, we worked so hard on a big push, and that deserves to be acknowledged. And we weren't really good at that. So, you know, throwing a party and saying like, yes, this is out there. We know it has a ton of bugs, but just like, let's get drunk and have a good time and give each other high fives. So yeah, to answer your question, I would recognize when a milestone has been reached and celebrate it.
We have that issue. I work for a company, it's not a startup, but it's like what, 16 people for like 14 years. That's
Yeah.
been going. But we were very good at responsibility for basically our entire time. You're responsible for this, you're responsible for that. But that like buzzword ownership was just a bullshit cover for the concept of responsibility. And once you have ownership in the company, then those celebrations of like, guys, fucking sales made its mark. Like,
Yeah.
we set that to be stupid high. We're gonna Gatorade the sales.
Yeah. Nice.
Like that, there was a company switch where like everybody was able to feel like the reverb from victories elsewhere.
Yeah.
And
That's a good
maybe-
point.
Maybe the team wasn't celebrating because the team was just like, that was 2 weeks of crunch. I'm dead.
Yeah.
You're not dead yet. We are gonna get you so hammered you're gonna wish you were dead.
Yeah.
And the company's ownership of what happened is sort of what's changed our personality.
Yeah. In a positive way.
Yeah, and I feel like, yeah, our company was not a fun place to work when I started, but it sure as hell is now.
Good.
From that.
Yeah.
ownership.
How many rounds of investors did you guys go to? Was it a friend or?
They were three angels. 2 of them were dads. 1 was a family friend. That was the initial investment, and then we picked up another couple small ones along the way.
Was that a hard process?
It sucks. It's terrible. That's why if you sell something first, you don't have to do that. Raising money sucks.
I'm just gonna plug the HR person. I've been in a couple startups where they don't have HR people, but your HR person is really your strategic partner. They're the ones that are gonna look at and say, okay, well, here's the gaps, here's how we can fill them, or here's certain people that can cover those areas, and this is the big project that's in the water, and this is how we'll celebrate if we hit those marks. Like, they are really your strategic partner. A lot of companies don't utilize them, or they go to an outside service and then they kind of shuffle that all off. But definitely want to plug that.
Me too.
How long before you guys like actually shut it down did you know that it wasn't gonna work or that it was gonna fail? And then
yeah.
What were the signs? Was it just money or was there other stuff?
It's a great question. All of us would answer it differently. When did we see the writing on the wall is what you asked. I mean, we stopped spending we stopped spending a majority of our time on the product back in September, and we didn't formally announce that we were shutting it down until I think like February or something like that. But I mean, from my personal perspective, I felt the writing was on the wall probably in June of that same year. And then you have to process that, right? Because you're responsible for this company, and you're kind of thinking to yourself, I don't think this is going to work. Am I going to stay committed to this thing, or do we have to have a conversation amongst adults that we need to part ways? And that's not an easy thing to do.
If somehow you could time warp back to the beginning and do it all over again,
Yeah.
Knowing what you know now,
Yeah.
do you think you'd be able to make it work? Or
I still don't. I think our model was great. The interaction was right, and nobody has really filled in that space yet. They're all kind of moving towards it. So the idea is good, but if I were to go back in time, would I be able to change things and actually execute on that? I don't know if we had the right team to do that. So if I started from ground zero, I might rearrange some of the key players. And then maybe, I don't know, probably not.
you're still even with 2020 so even with 2020 hindsight, you're still not completely sure it could have worked.
Yeah, I think so. It's a very noisy space. There's so many people asking plumbers to join their communities. So that's a really, really, and frankly, Minnesota's not a place to do this. Because you don't have people who are willing to cover your risk to do it.
So,
Yeah.
And in terms of take yourself too seriously. If you succeed, a big part of that is you were this in the right place, the right time. And if you didn't succeed, it may be, and you can't beat yourself up over that.
Yeah.
My startup's doing well, but a lot of our early sales the sales guy just happened to walk in the door
Yeah.
at the exact time that they needed something. And
Perfect.
you can't make that happen.
Yeah. By the way, this is my contact information. If you want to talk about any of this, I'm an open book. So shoot me an email or find me on LinkedIn or whatever.
First of all, I want to commend you on basically answering the question. Asked you,
Yeah.
and that was really respectful. But if there would have been, again, piggybacking on this question, if you could go back, what resources do you wish would have been available to you to utilize that you would have been, say, like I am a salesperson, I'm trying to start up a console business where I would help
Yeah.
grow their marketing, grow their sales. What type of other things do you
Yeah. Well, taking my previous point about selling it first and then building it, if I were to redo Heroic, the concept as it is, I would go and find maybe 5 pilot service providers and say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to be building a custom solution for you to get feedback on your services that people can share when they're Googling your company. Here's what it costs for us to build this custom thing for you and this small group of your trusted network peers. So that takes a sales, a greater emphasis on somebody being able to convince the people to buy onto that idea, and then development people on the back end to build whatever you're selling. So that's how I would change the approach. Yo.
I missed the first part of your presentation. Do you think there was, did you overestimate what the demand for your product or service would be, or do you think there were not enough barriers to entry for any of your competitors that diminished your profit that would have kept you afloat?
I still don't think people have cracked this. So I mean, the opportunity is there. We just, as you become intimately aware of the landscape and the challenges, you start to learn what you're up against. And like I said earlier, there's so many service providers, or there are so many technology solutions for helping service providers. It's really, my dad gets called, probably 10 times a week from some new company who's got some whiz-bang technology for them. So, and that's something we didn't know before. I don't know. I forgot your question in the midst of that. So hopefully I answered it. Anything else?
What's your next thing? Or is there another?
So if you guys went to the beta.mn event, I hosted that with a friend of mine. So that's kind of my foray into staying connected to people like you guys. That's kind of keeping me on the sideline, but still involved in the tech space. I know one day I'll probably be back in doing my own startup again. In the meantime, I love my job. I'm working for a product development company in Northeast called Worrell, where they're paying me to learn. So it's great. So when you fail, it's not bad. I have a great job.
I was wondering your thoughts on discipline. So like some of this stuff, at least what I see is like it's hard to stay focused and it's hard to set discipline
Yeah.
within your team and like be like, this is the direction we're going, this is the beginning and the end of it.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Like, did you find anything that helps you set the focus and the discipline for your team?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. For the sake of time, I yanked one of my lessons, but knowing your focus as a team is crucial. And we didn't. We were totally ADD. So it's hard for me to try to make suggestions about how to do that better. because I think sometimes it comes down to personality types, you know, involved in making decisions. So there's something you can't really change about somebody. But as an organization and as leadership in a startup, somebody really does need to take the reins and say, all these 10 things that we're thinking about doing, we need to get rid of 9. And we're going to do that one thing really, 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 really well. And that's what you got to do. I'm not sure, you know, what you can actually do to create that space other than have leadership and commitment to knowing that you can't do more than one thing really well. Yeah.
So let's say you have like a potentially really great idea,
Yeah.
but you don't have experience starting a business, and so you're doing your research into entrepreneurship. When do you know? How do you know when you're ready to actually start pursuing that idea? Do you just dive into it and pick up pieces and learn your lessons, or?
Yeah. So okay. So you have a great idea and you don't know how to build it. Is that right?
Let's say you know the technical background.
Okay.
You build it, but you don't know the business side.
Learn how to build it. And sit on that idea until you've figured out how to build it, because you'll discover in the process whether or not it's a great idea.
I'll plug my session right after this, which is for my kid in beta.
Yeah.
So if you want to attend, I'll share what I did is we're building.
Cool. Anything else? Well, thanks. Hopefully that wasn't too depressing.